Today's recipe is a simple and delicious pork chop with an apple chutney. Really, really straightforward, and it takes about 20 minutes to pull together. You want to start off by cooking your pork chops. These are boneless loin pork chops, and I'm seasoning them with salt and pepper pretty generously. You don't have to do a measured amount, just whatever sounds good to you, but it's a couple teaspoons. Turn them over to get both sides. Right now I have my skillet preheating, and I also have my oven at 400 degrees because I'm going to start them on top of the stove in a skillet, and then I'm going to transfer to the oven to finish cooking, because sometimes pork chops have a tendency to brown nicely on top of the stove, but they're not cooked through completely. So you might want to do that. Heat your skillet. Add a couple tablespoons of olive oil. My pan is already very hot. You can see that it is smoking, which maybe means it's slightly too hot. Hee hee, don't tell anybody. Add your pork chops and let them sear. I always feel like it's a fine line between having your pan hot enough that you're going to get a really nice sear and having it so hot that the oil does this. I sort of err on the side of really hot most of the time. Anyway, the apple chutney, you need 4 apples cut into dice. Oh wait, before I do that, sorry, I'm gonna heat another pan on the back of the stove because I'm gonna cook my chutney in this. You can do it in a saucepan. This is a skillet, that's fine. Another couple of tablespoons of olive oil. The pan does not need to be as hot, therefore no smoking. And to that pan, I'm gonna add 1 onion that's been diced and get that sauteing. I would say a 1/2 inch dice for your apples will be a good size. You want them to get cooked through and tender, but not broken down. And Granny Smith apples, which is what I'm using, are really good for that. They have a nice tang too. I think maybe the pork chops are ready to turn already because that pan was super duper hot. Let's check. Yeah, they got really nice and golden brown, which is great. The fat that's on the edge of the pork chop here, that will get a little bit brown in the oven, which is another reason to finish these in the oven, because that you don't really want it raw. The other way to get that to brown if you're not going into an oven is to just hold your pork chop fat side down in the pan and rotate it through. That does also render some of the fat, which can be nice sometimes. Give it 1 more minute, and then you can put it into your oven. And those will need about 5 minutes in the oven, which should give you almost enough time to do your chutney. You might actually want to start your chutney first because it can sit, but you don't want your pork chops sitting around too long. So maybe start with your chutney and then move on to your pork chops. When the onions are translucent, you can add your apples. You want to saute those just a little bit before you add the remaining ingredients. Give them a stir. I like doing this in a pan with a little bit more surface area, just for a little bit more room. Things aren't piled on top of each other as much. The apples will probably hold their shape a little bit better than if they were in a pot sort of all crowded together. So straight-sided skillet is one of my favorite pans. When your apples have sauteed for about 4 minutes, add a 1/2 cup of golden raisins. If you don't have golden and you have regular raisins on hand, go ahead and use those. Currants will work. Diced apricots would work. 1/2 cup of apple cider vinegar. A teaspoon of ground ginger. If you want to add some fresh ginger, you could. That would be delicious. Pinch of cayenne pepper. And a 1/4 teaspoon of dry mustard. Salt and pepper. You want to cover up your pan and just let it cook until the apples are tender but not completely broken down. That'll take about 4 minutes. And while the chutney is finishing cooking, you can take your pork chops out and let them rest so that they have a little bit time for the juices to redistribute. I was gonna put the pan down hot on the board. Bad idea. Don't do that. But they're nice and golden brown. If you use an instant read thermometer, it should read about 140 degrees. I'm gonna pour the juices from the pan right over the pork chops because you don't want to lose that flavor. It's incredible. It already smells so good in here from the spices that I stirred into that chutney, but I want to make sure that it's not cooking unevenly. It's making my nose wrinkle up, but that's a good thing. You're like, is that a good thing? And this makes more than you're gonna probably need for just this one recipe, but that's great because you can put it into a jar container and put it in your fridge and eat it with other pork chops or with chicken. So delicious. Don't get rid of it, even if you're not gonna use all of it for this. Spoon some of it over your pork chops, and as promised, that's dinner in 20 minutes. And who doesn't want that? The chutney is sweet and spicy and tangy and such a perfect accompaniment to these pork chops. Give this recipe a try and let me know what you think. It's dinner in about 20 minutes.